My name is Darnell Carter, and if someone had told me 6 years ago that I'd be lying in a dark basement somewhere in Mexico, hands tied, blood on my shirt, waiting for a cartel's verdict, I'd have thought it was some cheap movie script. But the truth was far scarier. I was 34, I worked in the transport division of an engineering company in Arizona. We handled highway projects, safety inspections, route planning, all legal, dry, nothing edgy. But in the summer of 2020, I got assigned a trip to Mexico. A simple task: survey a few areas where a new highway was planned, take some pictures, write a report. All official. I had no reason to be nervous. I rented a white SUV and headed toward the town of Tulancingo, then deeper inland. On the third day I got off track. The GPS froze, there was no signal, and the map they gave me looked like it was drawn in the night. I figured if I drove a few kilometers through a small village, I'd hit the right road. But instead of a village, I drove into something else entirely. This place didn't have a name. At least none was posted anywhere. The houses were crumbling, windows barred, streets empty, but I felt eyes watching me. People peered from behind curtains. Some stood silently by their doors like they were waiting for something. And then my engine died. Right there in the middle of the street. No warning. I stepped out of the car, popped the hood, even though I had no idea what I was doing. Within seconds, I heard footsteps. 3 men were walking toward me. One was skinny, with a long scar across his lip. Another was stocky, with a tattoo on his neck. The third kept his hand near a holster on his belt. The first one asked in Spanish, "Federal, Americano, DEAA?" I barely understood. I answered, "No, solo ingeniero, estoy perdido." But they weren't listening. One of them said to the other, "Too clean to be lost." And then I got hit in the back of the head. Everything went black. I woke up in a windowless room. My hands, legs, even eyes were tied. Someone had ripped off my shirt, kicked me in the gut, and said, "Talk gringo." I answered as best I could, "I'm not a spy, I'm an engineer. You can check my documents in the car." But no one checked anything. They didn't care about documents. They had already decided who I was. That first night I barely breathed. I heard someone screaming in the next room. Something metallic dragging across the floor. I tried to loosen my hands, but the rope cut into my skin. Then the door opened again. Someone tossed in a piece of bread and a plastic bottle of water. I didn't know where I was, who these people were, or how much longer I had. One image kept spinning in my head.
My mom.
She lived in El Paso. Every Friday, I called her. We'd talk about work, the weather, her favorite soap operas. But that Friday, I didn't call, and I wouldn't. I was sure I'd never call again. The second day they dragged me out. The light burned my eyes. Ahead of me sat a man in a black shirt with a skull patch on his shoulder. He had a deep voice, and he asked, "Who are you really working for?" I gave the same answer.
He laughed.
"Around here the ones who tell the truth don't survive. We play by different rules." Then he turned to one of the guards and said, "Bury him tomorrow. Tell Javier it's his job." I didn't know who Javier was, but I knew one thing: by tomorrow, I'd be gone. I spent another night in that dark concrete basement, staring at a ceiling I couldn't see. When the light did come on, the bulb flickered like in a horror movie. But that wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was the silence, because it no longer meant rescue. It felt like a sentence. Waiting. I didn't sleep. One word kept pounding in my head.
Bury him.
In the morning, a young guy came in. He looked different. No scars, no chains, no predator's grin. His name was Javier, and he held a knife in his hand. He entered silently, stood by the door. I thought it was the end. He knelt down in front of me, and said,
Lift your head.
I didn't move. I said.
Lift your head.
I looked up. He didn't mean to cut me.
He just stared.
Then he asked, "Are you really an engineer?" I nodded. "What were you doing here?" I explained. I told him everything from the start. About my job, the route, the GPS, the detour, how I had no idea where I ended up. Javier listened quietly. When I finished, he got up, walked around the room, and then said, "They gave me this task. They think I'm ready." I stayed silent. Then he added,
My father was here too.
they killed him. But not outsiders. Our own. I didn't understand at first. Then he said softly, I'm not like them, but I live among them. I asked, why are you here if you're not like them? He stared at me for a long moment, then answered, because around here, either you're with them, or you don't exist. Javier sat across from me, pulled a cigarette from his pocket, but didn't light it. He just rolled it between his fingers. Then he said,
Isn't anyone looking for you?
I said,
My mother will call the police.
but you know how that goes. The police won't find anything. He nodded.
True.
Around here, we are the police. He left without another word. Left me in that same darkness. But now, it wasn't fear that filled my head. It was a question, what if he really didn't want to kill me? What if there was still something human left in him? The next day, Javier came back. He was carrying a paper bag and a flask. He gave me bread, a piece of fish, and water. You need to eat, he said. We're leaving tonight. I flinched. Where to? He looked me straight in the eyes.
Far from here.
I didn't believe him.
Is this a trap?
He answered sharply.
If I wanted to bury you, I would have done it yesterday.
Then he added,
No questions.
just do what I say. I nodded. Not because I trusted him, but because I had no other choice. I ate the bread, and for the first time in 3 days, I tasted something. When night fell, Javier returned. He untied my hands, gave me his jacket.
And said, Follow me, slowly.
No noise. We slipped out through a back exit, circled around a few houses, crossed a field of cacti. Dogs barked somewhere far off. I flinched at every sound, but Javier walked calmly, like he knew every step. We reached an old pickup truck. He opened the door and said,
Get in.
we've got about an hour before they're all drunk. I got in. The engine rumbled.
And we drove down a narrow dirt road.
I asked where we were going. He said,
North, there's a farm. From there you go on your own.
I didn't know if I believed him, but every kilometer felt like one more step back to life. When we stopped, he handed me a map and an old phone. Don't call anyone from here. Wait until you're far away, and forget this place. I asked, why are you doing this? Javier answered, after a long pause.
Because I don't want to be like them.
And also,
Because when you looked at me in that room, you didn't scream or beg, you just looked like you didn't want to die.
and it reminded me of myself. I stepped out. We didn't say goodbye. He got in the truck and drove off into the night, and I was left there,
With a map, a phone,
and a chance that no one else they'd planned to bury ever got. I walked for nearly half a day. Fields, thickets,
the sun burning so hard it made my head ring. I had almost no water. The map was old, and I was a stranger in a country where you couldn't trust the road, or the people.
but step by step, I kept heading north. An old farmer picked me up near an abandoned bridge. I told him I was lost, that my stuff had been stolen. He looked at my scratched hands, and said,
You're not the first.
he drove me to a small town, where I finally made it to a motel. There, for the first time, I looked at myself in the mirror. Red eyes.
Sunken cheeks, cracked lips, I barely recognized myself.
I waited another day, before crossing the border. Legally, with a fake bus ticket, the farmer gave me. I used the phone. I was okay. That I'd be home soon. But I didn't say where I'd been, or what I had survived. When I got back to bed, Knosovk was mad. Somebody.
Wadatignis ops, outgeiste vel. 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 Wafalbos, outgeiste vel. Wadatignis ops, outgeiste vel. Wadatignis outgeiste vel. Somai, Miravel. Somai, Miravel. Kimoavel. Somai, Miravel. Tomai, Kimoavel. Wadatignes, Augeistavel. Kimoavel. Miravel. Kimoavel.
I was alive, but not free. At night I'd wake up in cold sweat, hearing voices, seeing the faces of the men who tied me up, and always Javier's eyes. He vanished like a shadow, but stayed with me forever. Months passed.
Somai, Miravel. Miravel. Wadatignes, Augeistavel. Somai, Miravel. Kimoavel. Kimoavel. Miravel. Miravel.
Everyone thought I was just withdrawn.
Miravel. Kimoavel. Miravel. 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 Kimoavel. Miravel. Somai.
Because I knew, if they found out I survived, and that someone from the inside helped me, that someone wouldn't live to see morning, and I couldn't let that happen.
Miravel. Kimoavel. 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 Miravel. Kimoavel. Kimoavel. Miravel. Kimoavel. Kimoavel. Miravel. Kimoavel. Kimoavel. Miravel. Miravel. Kimoavel. Kimoavel. Miravel. 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 Miravel.
I owed him my silence.
Miravel. 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 Miravel.
I went at Bulgada my silence.
Miravel. 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 Miravel.
They said one of the villages had been cleared, a few cartel members killed. One of them a young man named Javier Ortega. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know if it was him. But I didn't need proof. I just closed the laptop and sat in silence. 5 years passed. I lived like a shadow. No social media. No photos. No stories, as if I didn't exist. But something changed one evening in Detroit. I was making deliveries and stopped at a gas station. A boy ran out in front of me. About 13. Black. Skinny. He was running like he was being chased. Behind him, two guys in hoodies. One had a knife. I shouted, "Hey!" But they weren't scared. In fact, they came at me. And then something clicked inside me. Something that had been locked away for years. I grabbed a tire iron from my truck and stepped in front of the boy. One of them lunged at me. I struck him. The other backed off. Within a minute, they were gone. I turned around. The boy was just standing there frozen. "What's your name?" I asked. He was silent, then said, "Jamal." I got him in the truck. We drove in silence. Then he asked, "Why did you help me? You don't even know me." And I thought of Javier. His eyes, his voice, and I said, "Because once someone saved me too." Even though he didn't know me either. We drove down a road that no longer felt dead. And I suddenly realized, everything I'd been carrying inside, the fear, the pain, the silence, no longer had the same power. Because I had done something that mattered. I didn't bury it. I pulled someone out. Another year passed. I moved to Atlanta. Jamal, the boy I saved, became almost like a son to me. His mother, a single woman working 2 jobs, cried when I offered to sometimes drive Jamal to and from school. She said, "People don't usually help just like that." And I just replied, "Someone once helped me just like that too." Everything was quiet until one night. I was making deliveries in the South Side. It was getting dark when my van stalled at an intersection. I got out, opened the hood, and heard a scream. Across the street, a man was lying on the ground. Two others kicking him. One shouted, "We warned you, Javier." I froze. I couldn't believe it. I heard that name every day in my head, but didn't expect it here, on a dirty Atlanta street. I ran over. They noticed me and ran off. I fell beside the beaten man. Blood from his nose. A split brow. Scratches. But in those eyes, I recognized them. "Javier?" I asked. Softly. He opened one eye, looked at me, and whispered, "Darnell." It was him. Older, broken, but alive. We were silent for a minute, just lying there. Then I helped him up, got him in my truck, and drove him home. At my place, I bandaged his wounds. He sat on a chair like a stranger in a world that had long rejected him. Then he said, "You weren't supposed to recognize me," I answered. "But I did." He said he'd fled Mexico 3 years ago. After letting me go, they got suspicious. The investigation started. He managed to slip away, but then he didn't finish someone off, and saved someone else, and again, until he disappeared. His mother stayed in the village, but was forced into silence. He ran to the U, started working at a car wash, lived like a shadow, just like me. I asked, "Why did you help me back then?" He looked at me and said, "Because I saw in your eyes something I'd lost long ago in mine. Fear, but not fear of death. Fear of being forgotten. And I didn't want to be the one to make you invisible." I was silent. We sat quietly. Then I said, "This place isn't Mexico. Here you can start over." He smiled sadly. "But I'm still the same, with the same shadow behind me." I looked at him and said, "No, because now you're not alone." The next day I helped him get a job at an auto repair shop. He started a new life. Jamal immediately found a connection with him. They'd fix things in the garage for hours. And I just watched, thinking things could have been different. I could have stayed under that concrete roof. He could have become a killer. But we both made a choice. And now we sat in the same yard, drinking lemonade. The boy I saved laughing next to the man who once saved me. When I asked him if he regretted leaving that world, he said, "If I had stayed, I would have been dead back then. But now even if they find me, I've already lived for real, even if just a little." I often think about this circle. I became a victim. He a killer who showed mercy. I kept his secret. He survived. And again, we met to save each other once more. But now, not from a bullet, from loneliness. Because the scariest thing isn't death, it's living, knowing you don't matter to anyone.